Hello, Colesburg family. Here we are, another Wednesday night away from each other. I'd like you to consider with me for a few moments today a situation in Paul's life in Philippians chapter 1. Our times have been kind of difficult lately, but nothing compared to Paul, yet similar in some ways to a situation we find him in Philippians chapter 1. In verse 12, he talked about what had happened to him, or his circumstances, depending on the version you're using. And what exactly were Paul's circumstances? What had happened to him at this time? Well, if you keep reading, verse 13 talks about him being imprisoned, or in chains or in bonds for the cause of Christ. Now, this imprisonment was not a maximum security situation, not like his situation in Acts chapter 16, where he was actually put in stocks and in an inner cell. We find, if you look in Acts chapter 28, a few more of the details of the situation he's in Philippians 1. Acts 28, verse 16, and also verse 30, tell us that this situation is more like what we may call house arrest. Now, that's probably kind of how we feel, like we were confined to our homes. We've kind of been arrested. We're being forced to stay home. And Paul was limited in what he could do while he was under house arrest, so it's not quite like us. You may still, even though you feel like you're under house arrest, you're still, some of you at least, going to work. Some of you still going out shopping. You're still getting out some. Paul's a little more limited even than we are, so if you feel sorry for yourself, just turn and read about Paul in Philippians chapter 1, because he was limited in what he could do under house arrest. He did literally have to stay home. He was used to going out, traveling around, preaching the gospel. He couldn't do that. In fact, his house arrest here lasted around 4 years. So ours won't even last 4 months, hopefully. So just, again, realize that you have it better than Paul did. But I want us to consider what happened to Paul while he was under this house arrest situation, as he talked about the circumstances and what happened to him. Well, notice some good things that came from Paul's what seems like a bad situation. He said in verse 12 here in Philippians 1, "I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel." Now, how did that happen? We think about Paul traveling around preaching the gospel, and now he's confined. He's stuck at home. How could that help the spread of the gospel? Well, in verse 13, it presented an opportunity to him to preach to some in Rome that he may have never had otherwise. He says there, "so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ." Now, some places people involved in what we refer to as prison ministries, where Christians go in and actually teach people in prison, but that's only for maybe an hour or two a week. Here, Paul has an opportunity given to him where he's living with those in prison. He has 24/7 access to those who are in prison, and opportunity to preach the gospel to them, and not just to them, but all the guards as well. And Paul would have never had such an opportunity if it wasn't for this imprisonment that he suffered for the cause of Christ. So he saw the bright side in that. And he also said in verse 14 that his imprisonment served as an opportunity to encourage those in Christ. He said, "And most of the brethren in the Lord, having been confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear." You see, many who may have been suffering in various ways for the cause of Christ, they see Paul, who's actually arrested for the cause of Christ, and yet he continues to maintain his positive and upbeat attitude about all this. In fact, all throughout the book of Philippians, he talks about rejoicing. So when other Christians could look at Paul and how he handled the situation, he served as an encouragement to them. Now, let's stop and think about some application to us today. In spite of our house arrest, as we feel we may be under now, how can we take this bad situation and turn it into something good? Well, Paul talked about the positive influence he could have on unbelievers. I challenge you to ask yourself, While you're confined at home, does it present opportunities to you that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise? I know some of you have taken advantage of at least one thing. A lot of people nowadays are making masks for those who need them. And I know at least one sister from among our Colesburg family has been doing that, making masks. And maybe there are other things that you could do that you wouldn't have the opportunity to do if you weren't confined to your home. So I challenge you again to look around in your own life, consider your own talents and abilities, and think, what can you do as a way to serve others during this difficult time while you find yourself confined more at home? Surely there's something you can find, some way that you can make lemonade out of this lemon and be a shining light to those in the world around us. As Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount, to let our light so shine before others that they may see our good works and glorify God. Find some way that during this difficult time that you can make a positive and be a shining light to those around you in the world. So how is it we can encourage others in Christ even? Well, I ask you, what can you do to be a source of encouragement to other Christians who are going through the same? Can you maybe write a note, drop a letter, send an email, do something to reach out to somebody in need? Maybe send a care package. I don't know what you may come up with. But Paul talked about how he found a way to edify others during this difficult time. I know some churches have even had what they call like a drive-in church service on Sunday, and it's actually provided them opportunities to reach out to some that they wouldn't have had an opportunity otherwise. I know at least one place is doing this. They say they have visitors that are coming and joining them in that type of worship who've never come into the doors of the building. So while you find yourself under house arrest like Paul does here in Philippians 1, look for the bright side. Find ways that you can be a shining light to those around you, a way you can especially uplift and edify your brethren. Make the most of this bad situation and turn it into a good, a positive for others in your life. Well, I look forward to us all being together soon, but until then, look for the good in the bad. That's your message for tonight, and I hope that it challenges you in the week ahead to think about how you can make the best of this situation and continue to be active and effective in God's service.